So we're starting an assembly here today, and the first thing that we're going to want to do is place some parts into our assembly. I like to place the parts in one at a time as I'm attaching them and making all of their constraints. It just helps make the field of view a little easier to see and things don't get in my way. So I'm going to start out, going to assemble my automata box, and I'm going to start out with the bottom. Nice simple part, and I just added it in and clicked it. Now, one thing that I see is I don't like this orientation because this end right here is going to be the front, the opening, and I personally want that on the left. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this out, and I'm going to replace that piece. And when I place it, I am going to rotate it on the y-axis so that I get it in the orientation that I want. All right, so you can move any pieces and rotate them as you place them. I find that to be easier than to try to do free rotation. I just have no luck with free rotation. Some people are really good at it. I am not one of them. So I was really quick about how to do that rotation. So when you put your piece in, if you just right click, this little dialog box, option box will pop up, and it lets you do rotation on either the X, Y, or Z axis. Just give it a little try to see how it rotates in different directions, and you can do it more than one time. So if you do it wrong, you can go back and fix it again. But like I said before, it just makes it a lot easier, in my opinion, to rotate the parts as you're placing them in. Otherwise, you can use this this free orbit thing to try to rotate the parts, and I just never can get them to do what I want. I find it really, really cumbersome. So I just like to place them in the position that I want them. So now we have our back here. And the first thing we're going to want to do, our bottom, is to lock our bottom in place. When you're doing an assembly, if you do not have a piece locked in place, parts will move in weird and odd ways. So the easiest thing to do is to take a static piece, a piece that is going to be like the foundation, and lock it in place. So you do that by right-clicking over here on the browser bar on the object, and you go down to grounded, and you're grounding that piece. And then you'll also notice there's a little thumbtack symbol over the part file icon, and basically what that means is I cannot move this part. You can see also when I hover over it, my mouse changes and it has a little thumbtack. This piece is static. So when I do all of my constraints, all the other parts are going to move to be on this rather than this bottom move to be on other parts. So then we're going to go ahead and do a couple of constraints. So let's place our sides. Let's find the side. Okay, and we need two, so I'm going to go ahead and put in two. And when we are putting in our sides, we want this lower edge down here to actually be on this surface right there. So let's go ahead and do a constraint. So I'm going to choose the constraint right here on the bar, and it's going to come up over here on my other screen, and we're going to get this pop-up window here. And it's going to let us choose between assembly constraints, motion constraints, transitional, and constraint sets. Right now we are assembling things, so we are going to use assembly constraints. For the purposes of this project, we're going to be using mostly the flush and the mate, which is the default one when you open it up. You can change to flush right here, and that just means that the two surfaces are going to be along the same plane. You can see the diagram, whereas mate is going to be the two surfaces are in contact with each other. So let's start by using the mate, and we're going to put this side piece onto this bottom. So I'm going to say I want the bottom here, what I just highlighted green, to be mated with this bottom here. And you want to make sure that the entire thing is highlighted all the way around the edges, not just like an edge like this, because that would just be the edge. So click right there so the whole bottom rectangle is highlighted. All right. And you should hear a weird like little clicky dung sound, and then hit apply. And now let's go back to our home view, and you can see now, I'm going to close this, that our side is mated. Now we can still move it around a lot, but it is mated. You'll notice no matter what I try to do, it's not actually going below the surface here. So now let's do a couple more. we are going to constrain and do a flush, and I want this surface here to be flush to the front of the bottom. So we're going to do there, and we'll go there, and we'll say apply, and then rotate around a little bit, and I want this side here to be flush with that edge right there. Okay, and hit apply, and now that side piece, I'm going to close this, is locked in. That's it. So let's do the other one. So we're going to constrain it. We're going to start out with mate. I'm going to mate the bottom, or the top of the bottom, to the bottom of the side. And then this side of the side to the side of the bottom. I know that gets really confusing. Flush to flush, apply, and then the front of both of those parts to each other. And now I have those parts all locked into place. Next constraint I want to talk to you about is the insert constraint. The insert constraint is used strictly for, as its name implies, inserting objects into each other. In this case, we're going to insert the axle into the hole on the handle. And we could do this with flush and mate. It would take a few additional constraints to get what we need, or we could just use the insert constraint. So let's have a look at it. So we're going to go back to constraint. And again, this is an assembly constraint. It is the fourth one over. It's called insert. So we're going to click on insert. The first thing that you need to notice is there are two solutions here. There is opposed, where the two things are going to insert and point in opposite directions, and there is aligned, where they insert and they're both pointing in the same direction. And it's best to just see this in action to understand what that means. So we want to put this axle into this hole. And you'll notice as I'm hovering over it, this red dashed line is appearing. And there is an arrowhead on one end. And if I kind of move down towards the other end of the axle, the arrowhead points at the other end. So this is where that opposed and aligned thing comes in. It's referring to the direction of these particular arrows. So I'm going to, ultimately, what my goal is to have this end right here flush right here on the edge of this hole. So we can do this by hovering over my axle until I get the arrowhead pointing in the right direction, and I see the edge that I want inserted and flush highlighted. So you see on this edge right here, I've got it's totally highlighted red. So I'm going to click there, and now it's turned green, and you can still see my arrow. And now I'm going to go to my handle, and you'll see again when I hover over all these different things, different parts highlight and different arrows appear. I want the arrows to be pointing in the same direction. Actually, I want them pointing in the opposite direction because we have opposed right here. All right, and then I also want to highlight the edge of this hole right here to say, hey, this is where I want those two things to line up. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and click this, and it's going to be wrong for a second, but I'll show you how to fix it. Okay, so you see how we actually wanted the axle in the other direction. If I just go to my constraint box, and right now I have opposed selected, and if I just click on aligned, it's going to fix itself. Voila. And go ahead and hit apply, and there it is. It's done. Super, super easy. One constraint versus the 2 or 3 that it would take using mate and flush. So let's do that again. I'm going to undo this. So constrain, hit the insert, all right? You can hover over the object that you're going to be inserting, get your arrow in the direction that you want and the edge that you want, and then select the same thing on the hole that you want to insert it into. Get your arrows going in the same or opposite directions, whichever you want, and the edges that you want aligned. And then go ahead and click it. Like I said, this was opposed. We need it aligned, and it fixes itself. And then I'm going to do this one more time just to show you some of the differences. So say I want this edge here actually to be flush with this edge back here. I can do that. So if I hover over it and I've got my highlighted edge, and then I can see through the part, I can see the highlighted edge back there and the arrow. Click on that and look at that. whoops, sorry. It is inserted, but it stopped right there on the back. So that's not actually what we want. We want to make this not look terrible. We want the edge of the axle to be right here. So let's cancel that and we'll do it one more time exactly the way we want. Whoops. Right there on that highlighted edge. Change it, hit apply, and there we go. Now our axles are together. I don't know if you noticed, but up here a minute ago, while I was talking, Inventor gave me a save reminder. Inventor is also, just like Miss Cogswell, telling you to save and save often. So if you haven't saved and you've got part of the way into your assembly, save and save often. All right, the next thing that we need to worry about doing is having our axle turn with our handle when we actually turn the handle. So we need to lock the two of them together. But how am I going to do that? I'm going to use planes. All right, so I need to make the planes visible on these particular parts. Now, I was very careful when I made my parts, and I had the origin point, that green dot that's in the center of the cross in your modeling window. I had it be in the very center of my part. If you didn't do that, then you might have to add a plane in. I'm going to show you first how to just make a plane visible, and then I'll show you how to add a plane in. So all objects are built in with 3 basic planes. And if you go to your browser bar and expand it and go expand the origin, you're going to see the various planes that are always built in. So all you have to do is select the one you want, right click, and choose visibility. So I'm going to choose that same plane for both the axle and the handle, okay? And then I'm going to mate those two together. So I'm going to mate that plane with that plane and hit apply. And then when I insert this into my box and I crank it, which it won't crank right now, they will turn together. All right, so I did a little fast forward here and I used the insert constraint, my axle into the hole in my box. And when I turn it, you can see kind of that those two things turn together. But it would be much better and much easier if I could make, say, this side not visible so it's not blocking my view. So you can do this in 2 ways. You could right click and then just check on visibility, just uncheck it rather. Whoops, I did the wrong thing. Undo is our friend. All right, right click and uncheck visibility, and now that part is not visible. Or you can go over to the browser bar, right click and uncheck visibility. Now, when you have something not visible in your browser bar, it turns gray. It's telling you it's still there, it still exists, you just can't see it at the moment. So now when I turn the handle, you can see that the axle is turning along with my handle. The constraints I put on the axle into that hole that was on the side are still in place. They're just not visible right now. This constraint I want to talk about is a transitional constraint. And what a transitional constraint means is that 2 parts are moving together and there is a transition between them. So if I turn my handle, you can see how the first 2, this follower and this follower, are actually riding along the edge of my cam, doing the movement just like they would do in real life. I haven't done this last one because I want to show you how to do it. So we are going to choose constraint, and there's a tab called transitional, so choose on that one, and then you have to make a moving face choice and a transitional face. So the moving face is going to be the follower itself, the very bottom edge of the follower, and the transitional face is going to be this edge of your cam. So it's pretty straightforward. Click on the bottom edge of the follower and the edge of the cam. You'll get your little donkey noise. You can see how they're both green. You hit apply, close your constraint window, and now when I turn the handle, my follower rides right along the surface. You need to be very sure that you hit the follower first and then the cam, and that you actually get the bottom edge of the follower and the riding edge of the cam. Some people were hitting the side of the cam, and then Inventor was unable to carry that action out, and you'd get an error message, and we were all very, very frustrated. All right, last couple of comments about changing names of parts and why you should never do it. So we have set up this very elaborate constraint system in this assembly, and we've told the computer, hey, find this file by this part name in this location. So find my top in this folder. If I go over here and change the name, or if I go into the file itself in my computer and change the name, the computer itself is trying to follow a set of instructions that you've given it that says, go here and find this file. If that file under that name is not where it's supposed to be, the computer can't find it. They're smart, but they follow very specific instructions. And when the instructions have been broken, they can't improvise like you and I can. We can't say, oh, well, there's lock 1 instead of lock 2. It must be lock 2. The computer's just going to go, it's not there. I can't find it. I don't know what to do. And it will not work. So please, please, please don't ever change the names of any of your parts after you have started using them in an assembly. It will create more problems than it is worth. Okay, so we have covered how to lock parts in place. Remember, right click and go to grounded. We've covered how to make things visible and not visible. And again, right click and go to visibility. You can also right click on the part itself to do visibility and to do grounded. We have talked about the assembly constraints of mate and flush and insert. Remember, insert is used for putting in the purposes of our project, putting round pegs into round holes. I used insert to put the axle into the handle, the axle into all of the various cams, and to put the followers into the holes along the top. So we talked about mate and flush and insert, and then we talked about transitional, which is the one that allows for movement and things to follow along with proper movement. This is pretty much it for constraints. When you have questions, please, 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 just let me know. I will be happy to answer them. Don't struggle too long or too hard before you ask for help.